what this is. Right? Yeah.
What is it?
Come on, Jimmy. Seriously, the time is up. People are hip to this kind of stuff. I'm here tonight to blow the lid off it, to be the whistleblower. I'm sick and tired of the secrets and the lies. It is the secret symbol of the Illuminati.
They tell you fame is a spotlight. What they don't say is that the spotlight has teeth. Out here, power doesn't just hand out trophies. It sets rules, rewrites memory, and decides who gets to be sane in public. And for a long, long time, Michael Jackson stood in the middle of that machine and wouldn't play along the way they wanted. Not because he couldn't, because he'd seen too much. While everybody else smiled through the after parties and pretended not to notice the mess on the floor, Michael started keeping score. The story tonight isn't worship or takedown. It's about how two comedians who slipped the leash, Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle, ended up describing the same beast Michael was wrestling the whole time.
I've been in rooms at the top of the top, which albums are prayed over demonically. Music is prayed over demonically. That goes out to the world, goes out to the radio stations, goes out to the public.
It's about why the most powerful fixers in the business were never afraid of talent. They were afraid of what that talent knew. You can hear it in Dave's voice when he says, "You're not supposed to do this in my business." And in Jim's when he calls out the standing ovation everyone was supposed to cheer for. Those aren't lines from a script. Those are pressure leaks. They're what happens when the mask doesn't fit anymore. Everyone saw the glitter. Few saw the machine. Let's talk about the machine. For a minute, put yourself in Dave's shoes at peak heat. 50 million on the table, your name everywhere. And then the air shifts. It's not one big thing, it's 100 little nudges. The just do this pitch in a trailer. The don't make it difficult conversation with a producer.
Dave Chappelle walked away from 50 million.
No, that's not even close to what happened to this dude.
Everybody wants to know, why'd you walk away from $50 million?
I wasn't walking away from the money.
Yeah.
I was walking away from the circumstances.
Not they offered him 50 million and he turned it down. Who gonna turn down 50 million?
They're trying to convince me I'm insane.
The be careful what you say smile from a publicist that isn't a smile. The networks will call it creative differences. The blogs will call it erratic behavior. The streets will call it, man, what happened? But the person inside it calls it what it is, control. Dave didn't run from success. He walked away from someone else's definition of it. And when he tried to explain that on big platforms, the framing always tried to bend the words back into something digestible. Stress, pressure, mental health, break. It's not that those things weren't real, it's that they were never the whole story.
Wow, and I'm like, oh no, Puffy got hit. And Puffy be like, oh, keep going, Playboy. I kicked the bitch in the face and forgot about it.
The other part is what nobody wants on record, the price of saying no. Think about the dress story. It's silly on the surface, right? Just a gag, just a bit. Come on, everybody's done it. But the real story isn't the dress, it's the escalation. First a writer, then a director, then a producer, then the budget clock, then the guilt trip, then the charm, then the pressure. And when it still didn't work, 10 minutes later, a brand new scene magically appears, which means the demand wasn't about art, it was about obedience. That's the pattern. Now sit with this. If that kind of choreography shows up for a throwaway costume joke, what does the choreography look like for bigger asks, for reputations, for stories, for accusations and headlines and exclusive sit-downs?
Dave Chappelle was decapitated in front of us. They called him Pilot Boy because he had 19 pilots in Hollywood and everybody passed on him and said his show wasn't worth it. Then when he made $500 million, they said even though his contract said he should get half of it, they said he made too much for the contract.
Suddenly, creative decisions sound small. Suddenly, the room gets crowded with people you never see on camera. But this is where the story takes a turn. Because if Dave's retreat to regroup was a boundary, Michael's answer was different. He didn't run away from the world, he built his own. Neverland wasn't a delusion, it was distance. Emotional, physical, strategic. A place where he could shut the door on the machine and decide who came through the gate. If you've ever been overwhelmed in your own life, you know why someone would do that. You pull back. You curate your space. You spend your own money to feel safe. And the minute you do, the labels come. Eccentric, strange, not grounded. The more you protect your peace,
I don't exist. So they're all characters that I played, including Jim Carrey, including Joel Barish, including any of those things. They're all characters.
the more the outside world acts like you're guilty of something. But here's the difference that made Michael dangerous. He didn't sign the social contract, the unwritten one, the one that says, you'll be betrayed, don't take it personally. You'll be lied about, smile through it. You'll be set up, call it business. You'll be hurt, say you're grateful. Everybody knows the rules. Fuck, you can't get mad, you can't even look mad. You eat it, because there's money on the line and other people's jobs on the line and some vague future invitation on the line that you're not supposed to risk. Most folks eventually learn to swallow that. They stay for the access, they harden for the checks, and they tell themselves the story that helps them sleep. It's not personal. But imagine being Michael Jackson. Global reach, generational influence, receipts longer than an airport runway, and you can't unknow what you've seen.
Jim Carrey exposing the elites. Man, after I seen this video, man, I just gained like so many respect points for this guy, man. Like this guy, you guys don't get it. He's putting his life on the line. We wrote this tape.
The rooms, the calls, the favors, the cleans, the way reputations are vacuum sealed or punctured depending on who benefits. If you've ever wondered why he kept things close, why so many moves seemed private first and public second, that's not paranoia, that's strategy. And that's the word nobody likes to hear when it's coming from an artist. Strategy. People want artists to be pure and chaotic and grateful and simple. They don't want to think about chess. But Michael played chess, quietly. He collected stories the way other people collected awards. Tiny angles that don't mean anything by themselves, but together, they show how the game really works.
I was sickened. I was sickened by the standing ovation. I felt like Hollywood is just spineless, en masse. And it really felt like, oh, this is a really clear indication that we're not the cool club anymore.
Now, if you want to see how narratives get manufactured, look at how interview rooms are designed. You can feel the power in the framing alone. Who asks, who interrupts, who sympathizes at just the right moment so the answer fits the theme. Watch an interview where the subject is trying to talk about systems and count how fast it gets redirected to feelings. Feelings are safe. Systems are messy. Feelings are personal. Systems have names. I'm not saying every interview is a setup. I am saying there's a pattern, a preference, for packaging truth as therapy instead of testimony. And once you see that, it's hard to unsee it anywhere, especially when the subject is someone the machine can't control. Which brings us back to the people who control the stories, the gatekeepers, the brands with names that don't need a last name, the folks who can make a special tomorrow and call it a cultural reckoning. And by the time the subject gets a chance to answer, the world has already moved on. That's not journalism. That's timing. That's narrative management. You don't have to stretch to understand why Michael made certain people nervous. Think about the difference between platforming and proximity. Platforming is what you do to people when their story helps yours. Proximity is who you keep around when their shadow helps yours. Big difference. And when there's a storm, watch who gets a lifeboat and who gets an anchor. It tells you everything you need to know about the social contract in that circle. And if you think that sounds like Hollywood folklore, wait until you hear how silence is incentivized. We love to pretend that all the wild stuff you hear about is rumor, like the industry is one unbroken chain of baseless conspiracy. But every serious adult who's worked inside any powerful institution, music, film, tech, fashion, politics, knows the truth is simpler. People protect what feeds them. People excuse what pays them. People will revise their memory if it means their calendar stays full. You don't need an Illuminati to explain that. You just need a budget and a Rolodex.
It's the symbol of the all-mocking tongue. And I'm sick of it. I want everybody to be in on the joke, man. You know what I mean? Like, for years now, talk show hosts, people on television, people in sitcoms have been hired by the government to throw you off the track.
Now put that next to the stories leaking out of the party circuits, the prep lists, the cleanup routines, the don't film that moments, the delete that instructions. It's not about kink or moral panic. It's about the infrastructure around it, the employees, the systems, the look the other way agreements that only exist because the people in charge expect to be insulated. If you've ever worked in a place where executives get a different rule book, you already understand the template.
Here's where Jim Carrey's disillusionment fits. It's easy to chalk it up to one bad awards night, one slap, one interview. But listen to the part everyone skims past. We're not the cool club anymore. Translation, the mask slipped and nobody cared. The room gave a standing ovation because the room decided the room is right by default. That's the part that sickens people who still believe in actual standards. The performance mattered more than the principle. And that's the core of every story we're talking about. Whether it's a comedian being told to wear a dress for a bit, or an icon being asked to smile through a smear, Michael couldn't unsee the double standards. He couldn't unknow the favors. He couldn't unfeel the knives. So he did what engineers do with a shaky bridge. He documented the weak points. Not to burn it down necessarily, but to make sure that if it ever came to a fight, he wasn't walking in empty-handed. Picture the leverage in that. Not revenge, leverage. The knowledge that if you try to bulldoze me, I can pull a thread and your whole suit unravels. It's the only real protection someone like him ever had. Because money can be frozen, projects can be blocked, and public opinion can be switched off like a light. But truth, the right truth at the right time, can still ruin a chessboard in one move. Now, ask yourself why the loudest accusations about Michael always arrived at moments when he was either on the brink of a major pivot or too tired to fight. Ask yourself why the same platforms that looked away from certain predators for decades suddenly found religion when it was culturally fashionable and financially safe. Ask yourself why patterns are legitimate when they hurt some people and witch hunts when they hurt others. None of those questions prove anything on their own, but the timing tells a story. Dave felt it early. When he pushed back, the media tried to frame him as fragile. Meta. But look at the energy in his voice years later. He isn't fragile, he's forged. Jim's not fragile either, he's disgusted. Two very different men landing on the same sentence. The system is sick. And if the system is sick, then what do you call the person who keeps a diary of its symptoms? That's why some names couldn't sleep. Not because Michael was perfect, not because he was always right, but because he was present. He was there. He survived long enough and high enough to see across rooms where most folks never get an invitation. And when you've seen enough, you don't have to shout. You just have to be unwilling to lie. But this is where the story takes a turn. We're not talking about saints and villains. We're talking about incentives. Look closely at the people who preach accountability after the fact. The same ones who kept quiet when it mattered. The same ones who chose proximity over principle. It's not just hypocrisy, it's the business model. You bring the public a morality play that costs nothing and earns everything. Ratings, clicks, a round of applause. And you hope nobody notices how long you were standing next to the problem when it paid you to be there. The pattern doesn't require a mastermind. It requires only that you don't get mad when the knife lands between your shoulders, and that you don't speak on it when it slides out. If you can do that, you'll always be invited back. You'll always have a seat. You'll always be in the group photo.
And if you can't, well, ask Dave what they called him, ask Jim what they wrote, ask Michael what they did. And if you think that sounds like Hollywood folklore, wait until you hear how fast the machine can move when the wrong person holds the right story. We've all watched careers vanish in a week for less. We've all seen the C part for people who did more. If the rules were consistent, there'd be nothing to talk about. The problem is, the rules are only consistent about one thing: protect the center, protect the brand, protect the narrative. That's why the timing of certain specials, certain interviews, certain documentaries hits so clean. Not because truth suddenly appeared, but because power decided truth was useful this quarter. Contrast that with the other stories the machine still pretends not to hear. The employees who say too much, the assistants who remember too clearly, the footage that vanishes, the receipts that live on private devices until the cloud forgets. It's not a conspiracy to note that money can make memory selective. It's experience. Zoom back out. Sex 0.05 sex. The headline says Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle reveal why Oprah was terrified of Michael Jackson. That sounds dramatic. Let's translate it into human terms. Narrative power is scared of any witness it can't control. That's it. That's the sentence. Whether it's Oprah or any other brand name platform, the fear isn't about a person, it's about leverage. It's about what happens when someone with reach and receipts decides they're done being polite. There's a reason the most honest things you hear about the business rarely come from press tours. They leak at comedy clubs and after parties and random panels where someone forgets they're supposed to pretend. That's why Dave's "you're not supposed to do this" line hits. He wasn't just venting, he was breaking a spell. And that's why Jim's "we're not the cool club anymore" lands like a last straw. He wasn't being edgy, he was being tired. And before we wrap, there's one final detail. Ask the two questions nobody in power ever wants you to ask out loud. If Michael collected evidence of conversations, of pressure, of promises and threats, where is it now? And who else is collecting right now, quietly waiting for the moment when truth is more valuable than access? Because that's the part the machine can't predict. It can label, it can spin, it can blacklist, platform, and repackage, but it can't unknow what the people in the room know. And it can't guarantee the people in the room will stay quiet forever. Maybe that's why certain figures felt nervous every time his name came up after he was gone. Not because of ghosts, because of unfinished business, because of files, because of memories. Because of the possibility that the story the industry told about him was only the story the industry needed at the time. And a different story could still be told if the right people decided to tell it. The irony is, the only thing that would calm those nerves is the same thing that keeps the machine running: silence. If the files stay dark, the parties roll on. If the witnesses keep choosing proximity over principle, the boat barely rocks. That's why the pressure never stops. That's why the packaging never ends. That's why someone will always be there to turn a system critique into a therapy session, a refusal into a tantrum, a boundary into a breakdown. Here's the truth underneath all the noise. Michael Jackson scared people who manage stories because he refused to let them finish his. He wouldn't stop creating, wouldn't stop redefining, wouldn't stop building rooms where their rules didn't apply. And when he was gone, the rush to define him wasn't grief, it was vacuum control. Somebody had to make sure the narrative closed the way the machine prefers: tidy, tragic, resolved. But legends don't end clean. They ripple. They keep surfacing in other people's mouths, in other people's shock, in the sudden honesty of someone who doesn't need the room anymore. That's what you hear in Dave and Jim. Echoes, not of a man's perfection, but of a man's refusal. The refusal to play dumb about what he'd seen. So where does that leave us? With eyes open, with better questions, with a reminder that celebrity doesn't make you safe. It just makes your enemies patient. And with one last thought for the night. Power fears the witness more than the accuser. Accusations can be handled. Witnesses ruin timelines. If you were Michael and you'd watched the machine rewrite people in real time, wouldn't you keep your own version? Wouldn't you hold the notes, the tapes, the details that mean nothing alone but everything together. Wouldn't you build a place where, for once, you get to decide who comes in and what story leaves with them? That's not paranoia. That's survival. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real reason the room got so tense every time his name came up after he was gone. Not because of what they could prove about him, because of what he could prove about them. If that thought makes you sit up a little straighter, good, it should. Because no matter how many times the machine refreshes the feed, truth has a stubborn way of outliving the PR cycle. It waits. It passes hands. It lands in jokes and side comments and little refusals that seem minor until they stack up, and suddenly the room isn't laughing anymore. That's the moment the cool club stops being cool. That's the moment the spotlight shows teeth. If you're still here, you get it. Drop your take in the comments. What do you think happened to the stories Michael couldn't tell in time? And which insiders today are quietly keeping their own files? Like the video if this made you see the pattern a little clearer. Sub if you want more unwrapped industry truths without the sugarcoat. And as always, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep your own receipts.